Thank you so much, Ideagen. We're here today during the 17 days of sustainability. We're focusing on goal 4 for today's Power Chat. So we're talking about ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning and opportunities for all. And our speaker for today, I'll call her up. I'm so thrilled she has agreed to be featured on this Power Chat. She's a very dear person to me. She's my supervising professor from when I wrote my dissertation. So having her here on our show with Ideagen means the world to me because she is a mentor and a champion of Goal 4 in so many ways. So Dr. Joyce Pittman, please come on up to the virtual stage and introduce a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, it is a pleasure, Christine, to once again be in the presence of you and also to be here to talk about this important topic. I feel honored and blessed. I am Dr. Joyce Pittman, Professor Emeritus at Drexel University, and I'm also head of my own consultancy, Global Education, Technology, and Research Associates, where I am actively putting together a network of like-minded voices to help me pursue such issues as quality education. I am directing a project that is directly connected to quality education, and it's called the Global Teach Connection Project with Drexel University and with the University of Pennsylvania. In addition to that, I work with a number of other agencies and organizations, including UNESCO groups, the World Council on Curriculum Instruction, where I sit on the board of directors, as well as civically engaged, re-engaged women, and other groups throughout the United States who have similar interests in terms of maintaining quality, developing as well as maintaining quality education in these diverse environments that we're currently facing in our nation.
And I love listening to how you have created so broad an impact through all of the work that you do. I think the field of education is dynamic, it's ever changing. And as we get a little more into our discussion on what it really means to create inclusive and equitable quality education opportunities, I know we talk about those words a ton. As we get into our discussion, I'd love to know, maybe break those down for us, describing a few of the ways that you've been able to bring those opportunities to life.
Thank you so much. First, I'd like to begin by saying that this is a topic, of course, that's near and dear to my heart, being an African-American woman who was reared in the South. Quality education to me has always meant a ticket to the world, a ticket to freedom, because it would provide me with an opportunity to pursue lots of other opportunities, and as well as to help others pursue such opportunities. And to that means, I've always been very concerned that we leave no one behind, that we include everyone in this system that we call education. So something that I've always believed about education is that it is a fundamental right. Currently, there are about 263 million children and youth around the world who are kept out of the classroom. Many of them are excluded due to discrimination, including over 130 million girls who are excluded based on simply because of their gender. And so quality education to me means not only quality in education at certain levels, but at all levels and in all environments. And I would simply define that as being inclusive of social, emotional, mental, physical, cognitive development of each individual, regardless of our gender, our race, our ethnicity, our socioeconomic status, or our geographic locations. And so for me, I guess I would say that quality education involves not just part of an individual's life, but their whole life. Because education is preparing for life. It is life itself. And so we want to make sure that we are providing the highest quality of life to each individual. And that comes through awareness, and awareness comes through education. And so that is how I see quality education.
I love how you lay that out for us. Education is not just about one sliver of what makes up a child. It's about what makes up that whole child. Everything that makes them up: physical, mental, emotional. I love how you laid that out. And as I was listening to you, I thought of W.B. Yeats' quote: education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. And I think that is something that in all of your work, you have done so well. You have ignited a spirit where if someone didn't have access to that opportunity, they saw it because of your work, and then they wanted to pursue it because of your work. Now, I know that work has not been easy. There have been challenges along the way. And so I'd love to hear, and you can tell our audience a little bit about how you have overcome those challenges, because I know sometimes when we're doing the best of work, we hit those roadblocks along the way.
I would say the greatest challenge, that one of the greatest, there are so many, but one of the greatest challenges that I had to overcome was the fear of failure. And so many of us have been programmed to believe that when we fail, that means that we did not succeed. But in many ways, the way that we find that path to success is through failure, because we have to learn how to embrace it as a part of the entire learning paradigm. And through failure, we improve and we grow if we learn how to internalize that as a positive rather than a negative. And for during my early years, even though I was privileged to be what was classified as a great student, but I was also programmed to believe that if I got less than an A or B on anything, then that meant my whole world would come apart. And so today, I see, when we look at our assessment system and the way that we set our standards and evaluate our teachers as well as our learners, there's so much, I'd say, conflict. And I see that as a great challenge as I have pursued educational access and equity across the board, which I believe doesn't start in school. I believe it starts, again, as I emphasized in other presentations, that it begins in the home. And so if we want to have high quality education, we must focus on our early years and the early childhood education that we provide. The models that we provide are very important. Once I overcame that, I guess then the next issue for me, as far as one of the challenges, was helping myself and others to overcome what I would say would be imposter syndrome, sort of believing that, sort of to the point of self-determination, that I'm not good enough, even though I'm not worthy enough, or I really don't know as much as I think I know, as much as people think I know. So many of the early challenges were personal. And then we get down to the systemic kinds of challenges that are barriers to quality education, which includes the different policies and practices, instructional methods, and those kinds of issues that we find in our schools, and also addressing how to properly, appropriately prepare our teachers for the increasingly diverse learning environments that we have. Because we have so much diversity in our country, but yet we have some areas of our country where there's little to no diversity in those areas, and we have to prepare teachers for both environments, for the environments where there is diversity and not, because after all, education is preparing one for the world. It's not preparing us to stay where we are. It's preparing us to move beyond where we are. So we have to look at our community schools and our private schools. We have to look at, at every level and in every system in terms of how we are addressing equity in education and social justice and culturally diverse and relevant training, not only for our teachers, but as well as for our leaders. Because our leaders, it's so important now that we are looking at our leaders as being more instructional supervisors. We expect them to have knowledge of pedagogy. We expect them to understand uh, the barriers that teachers face in the classroom, so that when we are planning and looking at professional development and how to use our funding in our schools, that we must know where the how and when and who to involve, what voices are important in setting those priorities, so that we don't leave anyone out. And so we go on and look at other kinds of barriers. I would say is identifying the appropriate kinds of partnerships and collaborations that we need in order to make all this happen, because it can't all be reliant on one particular school, because it is a system. And so we look at also our funding from the top level in terms of what is being funded and what is not being funded, what programs and supports are needed, and more importantly, is sustained. Because oftentimes what we find is that we have specific grants and programs to work with particular groups, but then those funds run out. And what happens to the program? It disappears, and so we get diminishing returns. I've been a big supporter of going after both private and federal, state, any kind of funding that is available in order to provide some sustainability to initiatives that are developed. But more so is training our teachers, training our schools and leaders to become self-sufficient, to develop those types of strategies that will not be necessarily dependent on funds, because you take those lessons that are learned from those projects and you integrate them and you make them part of the curriculum instead of an event. So we can't continue to address educational development as an event. It is not an event. It is an ongoing process, and that process requires uh, uh, sustainability. So in closing, so before I close out that, I would just say that the challenges in many cases, it's not that individuals don't want to do their best. It's not that they don't want to provide quality education, but it becomes a matter of a lack of awareness due to some of the ill-structured domains or that we have set up for assessment, so that we are not truly aware of how to use those assessment results, or the difference between assessment and testing. There's been a fine line between that, not only in in our classrooms, but also in other places where we train and prepare our educators as well. And so we want to look at those kinds of issues and how they set up and become barriers when we don't properly educate or create this level of awareness that there is a problem.
And I so appreciate the foundation you've laid for us with all the challenges almost stemming from a lack of treating education like an ongoing experience and treating it more as a single solitary event. That phrase, amongst many other of the ones you used, stuck out to me because it correlates so well to goal 4, promoting lifelong learning
Absolutely.
opportunities for all. And
Absolutely.
And when we think of what this really means for all from a top-down systemic approach, it is treating our teachers, our leaders, our students, preparing them to be almost self-sustainable with their own evaluation practices. And I love kind of what that world would look like. We're not quite there yet, but it's conversations like these that help me see that world and see that world come to life. So I know you have worked with so many collaborators globally to make that world that you're describing a realization today. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the role collaborators and partners have played in this work, Dr. Pittman.
Well, the role of collaborators has been, I'd say, somewhat diverse in terms of how they support providing quality education. Of course, one of the primary roles has been that of providing, I would say, financial support. In other cases, it's resources, it's not just one resource, but a network of resources, making what assets, what they have available to them, available to me or to others who are trying to achieve the same goals. And it includes also expertise, being able to call on experts to sit on advisory councils and advisory boards and to advise. I can remember specifically when I was recruited to go to the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, and that was back in 2005, where I ended up remaining there for a good 6-7 years, working with groups of educators and researchers from around the world who were accessible and who came in to help assess what the learning problems were and what was needed in order to fix or to advise change in systems that were deemed to be somewhat outdated or even sometimes oppressive. And it takes many different voices in order to bring about certain change. And so that has been the role of, of partners and collaborators, is being partners in every way, helping to basically solve problems. And I always say, the more voices we have, the more likely we are to come up with a more an approach that can work for many different groups rather than just, say, a single group. So we look for opportunities like that with collaborators and those who are willing to, in some cases, just being there and available and willing to listen and to be loyal to the cause, so to speak.
And I love what you're saying about, being available to listen, being able to roll up the sleeves, making sure that all partners have a seat at the table and can use their voice at the table. Because I think sometimes, even though we're all in the same room, for various reasons, we might not see the table, we might not have a seat, we might not have a voice. And so I'd love, as we kind of head into our final questions here, any advice for people who are doing this incredible work out there across the globe? Any advice from the years of experience, the projects that you've worked on that you can share with us today?
One of the first pieces of advice, and I always say, be careful with giving advice because not everybody wants it. But, because you asked me, I'm going to give some.
I asked you.
The first thing I'd like to say is be prepared to persevere, because you may not see results right away. You might think, well, is what I'm doing making a difference? Be prepared to, when you set out to uh, initiate an idea or to operationalize the idea, have in mind how you're going to evaluate so you will know when you're getting there and when you're not. So I think evaluating and having benchmarks, having a way to judge your progress is essential. And that takes sometimes longitudinal data, it takes qualitative and quantitative data, it takes diversified strategies in order to follow and monitor our results. Be prepared to move away from your comfort zone. Sometimes we get so comfortable doing something the same way until we become closed to new ideas. So I would say be creative thinkers, be creative, be innovative, and look for people who are creative thinkers. Don't look for people who think like you. When you start to put together your team, you want to have different perspectives. Be responsible for uh, uh, for creating an environment that makes others feel safe. To make them feel safe to create, to think, to express themselves, and be prepared to continue to learn, to be a learner, because none of us are of experts, so to speak, because there's always new knowledge. There's always, as I call, learning forward, going uh, something that we don't know. And so every step that we take, there's another step and there's another step until until the journey ends, and it will never end because the world is continuing to move and it's continuing to change. So that lifelong learning that we talk about, that's mentioned in this goal, is it's highly essential in order for us to create this environment of culturally relevant and inclusive, equitable, high quality education. And that's just some advice that I would give. Um, there's much more that I could say, but I don't want to get on a tangent.
Well, I think that advice, I loved hearing it, even for myself, because every day is a new day to learn more. And that ties in not only with goal 4, which we're talking about today, it ties in with an entrepreneur's mindset, a leader's mindset. It really propels the world and individuals to work for the change that we want to see, the change that ultimately makes our world not just different, but better, and better for all. So thank you for that advice. I know we've covered so much ground today. Is there anything else that in our final question you'd like to share, maybe that came up or you maybe didn't have a chance to share earlier? Anything else you'd like to share before we sign off for today?
I would just like to say to all of us, I think that it is imperative. Inequalities happen because of discrimination, because we see one way with this group or another, and another, and another, a different way. So I think that we need to all work to end all forms of discrimination everywhere, in education, in our communities, in the world. And if we can learn to listen with our hearts and to, well, treat others as we would like to be treated, so to speak. I know that's an old adage and it's probably been heard many times, but I think that that's necessary. And in building your networks and in building your support system, you've got to trust. And you want to build trust. And to build trust, you have to trust and take risk. And with that, I'll say, I hope to meet many of you as I move forward. I hope to connect with you in some of these efforts such as the Global Teach Connect project that I have going on, the work that I'm doing with Drexel University, the work that I'm doing with the United Nations, the World Council on Curriculum and Instruction, where I was just elected president of that group, and hopefully you're going to be hearing more from me about that in the future. So there's so many opportunities to get involved, and I would love to work with you.
Well, Dr. Pittman, it has been such a joy to chat with you today. Thank you for sharing your insights, for imparting your wisdom, and for everyone who is listening, we do hope that you do get involved. We are here, Dr. Pittman is here, and the work that we are involved in, the work that Dr. Pittman is leading could not be done without each and every single one of you all. So thank you all for watching, for viewing. We hope to hear from you. Until then, take care, be well, and do good.